Hey guys, hope you're all doing great out there and welcome back and ting and ting and ting. And I'm gonna watch a video that was suggested to me, and it's called A Canadian Slavery Story. Let's go ahead on YouTube and simmer and see what this is all about.
It's April 10th, 1734, and Montreal is on fire. By the time the flames are extinguished, 45 buildings have burned down. The entire merchant's quarter. Everything you see around me, ashes. The Hotel Dieu, one of North America's very oldest hospitals, is consumed by the blaze. The nuns who run it race into the streets with their patients. Montreal's worst nightmare has been realized, and the cause is arson. A woman who lived here, Marie-Joseph Angélique, is tortured and hanged for the crime. But today, that convicted arsonist is a celebrated historical figure. And the story of how that happened is a disturbing tale from one of the darkest chapters in our country's history. This is Canadiana.
Well, that's a hell of an introduction. Wow, I'm really intrigued now.
Marie-Joseph Angélique was a Canadian slave. The history of slavery in Canada is too often overlooked, but we had more than our fair share of it. More than 4,000 people were enslaved in New France and the British colonies before the practice was finally abolished.
Okay, now there was slave trade there. But we also have to understand that the slavery was pushed on by colonists coming in. So, and I'm not saying there's not ancestors of slave owners and stuff in Canada. It doesn't seem like it was as prevalent as it was down in this region, down here and in the Caribbean and stuff like that. Not making excuses. You know what I mean? Because of, this history seemed to just be coming out because he said it's like kind of forgotten or often too forgotten. But let's keep going and see what this is all about here, okay?
Slavery up here looked quite a bit different than it did on the southern plantations of the 13 colonies. In Canada, the enslaved were usually confined to urban areas, forced to act as servants to the elites. Many were black, taken from overseas or south of the border, while many others were called panis, indigenous people captured in battle and then made personal property. Angélique was originally from Madeira, but forced into slavery. She was sold to a Montreal couple when she was just a young woman. She was bought by François Poulain de Francheville and his wife Thérèse, who lived here on the Rue Saint-Paul, just across the street from the Hotel Dieu. Angélique's life in Montreal was unsurprisingly horrific. The Franchevilles were even suspected of forcing her to carry the children of another black slave. All three of her babies died within months of their birth. But at the end of 1733, there was finally some good news. A smallpox epidemic. It killed hundreds of people in Montreal, including François Poulain de Francheville. Angélique had been promised her freedom upon François' death, possibly a twisted bargain made as part of years of sexual abuse. There was finally some light at the end of the tunnel. There was still one person standing in her way, the widow Francheville. She wasn't about to let Angélique go. She wanted to get her money's worth. Angélique fought back. She demanded her freedom and seems to have threatened the widow with burning and roasting. But the widow Francheville still refused. Instead, she was going to sell her. So Angélique began to plot an escape with her lover, a convict named Claude Thibault.
Now, that's another thing they seem to have done a lot of there. Convicts and criminals were like banished to places like the Caribbean and the American north up here, and of course, obviously in Canada, like Australia, for instance, was dubbed a penal colony. And to me, coming from the Caribbean, it seems sort of ironic that they dubbed that like a punishment to send them to these places. Of course, too, what was it? Smallpox epidemics was killing them. There were diseases that could kill them. Their bodies weren't used to, this part of the world. But then that's Canada, so it's probably sort of similar, but still, a new frontier, no diseases and stuff like that, you know. Just like if we decide to settle on Mars or on the moon, there's going to be diseases that's going to, you know, not be too good. Good Lord, could that spawn more slave labor? But you know, it's just interesting because I know some Scottish people and Irish people was sent to the Caribbean as indentured service or slaves, you know, because they were criminals. You know, yeah, of course, back then, being a certain type of criminal was probably deemed plausible by those haves. And so I don't want to say elites, it's had the haves and stuff like that, but it's just crazy how it's like a punishment. And here I am saying, I'm going back to the island, sun, sand, sea, and fun. And fun, but that's because, you know, I'm going back as a free person, you know what I mean? I was free before I came. I'm going back and still be free. And it's not I don't look at it as a punishment, I look at it as a little relaxation. But back then, it was a punishment to be sent to those places. That's just crazy.
He was a smuggler from France who'd been arrested and exiled to Canada, where he ended up becoming the widow's indentured servant. Together, the couple came up with a plan. They would escape and find a ship in New England that was headed for Europe. Marie-Joseph Angélique wanted to go home. They would need to hurry. In February, things grew dire. The widow sold Angélique to a man in Quebec City for 600 pounds of gunpowder. The sale would go through as soon as the St. Lawrence thaw, allowing Angélique to be shipped downriver. With the clock of the spring melt ticking, she and Claude had to act fast. Angélique set her bed on fire. In distraction, as she and Claude ran off across the frozen river under the cover of darkness. But they didn't get far. The police quickly hunted them down, returned Angélique to the widow, and threw Claude in jail. He wouldn't get out until the day of the next fire. That night, there was an evening mass. Many of Montreal's 2,000 inhabitants were there. Back on Rue Saint-Paul, Angélique waited outside for the widow to return from the service. She was with her friend, Marie an enslaved Pani woman who worked next door. They played a game to pass the time, seeing who could run across the street to the Hotel Dieu the fastest. A soldier stood in the door to the hospital. A few children played in the street. Suddenly, the soldier yelled fire. Rue Saint-Paul was burning. All hell broke loose. There were evacuations, looters, bucket brigades trying to quash the flames. Amazingly, no one was killed, but many, including the neighborhood's poorest residents, were left homeless. In the wake of the disaster, a rumor began to spread. Some claimed they'd heard Angélique say,
Ma maîtresse ne couchera pas dans sa maison ce soir.
It was the rumor that sealed her fate. The city...
That's another thing I noticed about back in those times too, from a lot of stories I've read. Rumors could get you incarcerated or executed or stoned or something, you know what I mean? Just a rumor. People go crazy when they heard rumors back then. They do the same here too, but then it sort of slows down for after. Well, nah, I take that back. Because the way we operating with the politics right now, you start a rumor, you know. Like the other day I was at work and a co-worker came up to me and says, did you know that Michelle Obama was a man? And I was like, good Lord Almighty. That's a rumor. Nobody knows. So yeah, I take it back. Rumors could get people socially executed.
He was reeling, looking for someone to blame. Angélique was arrested immediately and charged with arson, a crime punishable by death. Many witnesses claimed they'd seen the fire start in the attic of the widow Francheville's home. And in a colony where lawyers had been banned by Louis XIV, it was up to Angélique to defend herself. It was her word against hearsay. One after another, 23 of the 24 witnesses told basically the same story. They'd all heard the rumor. Angélique had bragged that the widow would not be sleeping at home. The source of the rumor was Marie-Manon, the panty slave from next door. But 6 weeks into the inquiry, the prosecution still needed something more substantial than that. Like, say, a confession extracted by torture. So that's what they were gonna get. Until a new witness was uncovered. It was the widow's own 5-year-old niece who told the judge she'd seen Angélique head up to the attic with a shovel full of coal. The little girl...
Now, here's the thing, though, you know. Did the little girl actually see it? Was she coerced into saying that she saw it? Was she just a little girl that wanted attention, so she said that? And if she said it and she knew it wasn't true, how did she feel later? Or did she care? Because of the label upon people like Angélique.
Looked at Angélique and said,
Tu es montée en haut.
that was it. Angélique was sentenced to have her hands cut off and then be burned alive at the stake. After a pathetic excuse of an appeal, her sentence was lessened. She would be hanged and then burned. But first, she would be tortured. You see, a death sentence wasn't enough. Her lover, Claude Thibault, he'd vanished without a trace, never to be seen again. They wanted to know whether he or anyone else had acted as her accomplice. So they brought out the boot, a medieval torture device. They enlisted another black slave to perform the procedure. Mathieu Levé had been convicted of murder in the Caribbean, and they gave him a choice: be executed or become an executioner. He placed 2 wooden boards on either side of Angélique's legs and tied a rope around them tight. Then he hammered a wedge between her knees. As he drove the wedge down, her bones were crushed. They called this ordinary torture. Angélique...
Ordinary torture? Wow. You know, we could sit here and go, my goodness, that's some real medieval, vicious torture. But, you know, there's torture these days that are just as bad. And it's probably happening while we speak right now. I don't know if people they tend to hide it better or what, but you know, it's going on, right? That's what I'm sitting right here. Somebody is getting tortured. But in a world as big as it is, I guess it's kind of inevitable that kind of stuff is going to happen. But still, man, whew, it can't get any worse than that.
confessed, saying she had set the fire, but insisted that she'd acted alone. So Levé took another wedge and drove it between her ankles. This they called extraordinary torture. He brought the hammer down again 4 times. Angélique repeated her confession and begged to be put out of her misery. Broken and suffering, she was loaded onto a cart and brought here to the famous Notre Dame. She carried a torch in one hand and a sign that said Incendiaire. She was paraded before the crowd and then taken inside and made to confess her sins to God. Her torturer became her executioner. Levé brought Angélique to be hanged in front of the ruins of the fire. Her body was kept there on public display for hours after she took her final breath, until finally, with the same torch she had carried to the gallows, they burned her lifeless body and scattered her ashes to the wind.
And what's so weird about it too is that it all seems so ritualistic. You know what I mean? The same torch that she carried there burned her body, as if she's going to know after death that, you know, hey, the hand that carried the torch. Wow, it's really ritualistic how they did that.
The story of the executed slave was buried over the next 2 centuries, forgotten in favor of tales of Canada's role in the Underground Railroad. That is the slavery narrative we prefer to tell ourselves. It wasn't until recently that historians unearthed the preserved documents of the trial, helping to shed light on one of Canada's darkest episodes. Marie-Joseph Angélique has become an inspiration to many. Immortalized in paintings, plays, and myths, she's become a symbol of resistance, still lighting fires more than 200 years after her death.
Wow. I'm surprised there isn't like an epic movie about this here, you know what I mean? Of course, they know they're going to turn it into this love story between her and Mathieu. No, not what's that guy's name? No, Mathieu was the executioner, but you know, I'd like to read more about this story here, you know what I mean? Comment down below, tell me what you think of this, tell me what you know of this, you know what I mean? And I'll leave a link in the description to this video. Go check it out and thing, you know what I mean? If you enjoy or you learn something from what I react to on here, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I put out videos, and like and share the video, you understand what I mean? So everybody could learn something. Y'all take care of each other, all right?